We're trying to set a new record for aldermatic time. We're only 40 minutes late today. We apologize. It takes us a while to raise a quorum sometimes, but I believe, have one now. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Bosley.
Present.
Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Conway.
Present.
Alderwoman Cruzen. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman French.
Present.
Alderman Carter. Alderman Coatar.
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Chairman Roddy.
Present.
We have 9 present and we have a quorum.
Great. Before we take up one of the, any of the board bills, just a little housekeeping. I had made the announcement last Friday at the board meeting that our Director of Development would be here today to give us an update on NGA and also talk about our incentive study, the long-awaited incentive study. Evidently, he had a pressing meeting today, I think, regarding the NGA, so he was unable to attend. So we are going to schedule his appearance next week. And then I guess I have learned that I had gotten briefed on the incentive study about 2 weeks ago, and I had asked for a copy of it at that point. I was told that they were making final revisions of it, and I was under the impression that that hadn't been done, but evidently that was, the incentive study was released somehow or another last weekend. And so I just want to say that I had no forehand knowledge of that being released, but evidently it's out there. I received an email with a copy of it last night, and I didn't know from SLDC. Has everyone else received that yet, or? No?
I think it was posted on the internet. STL.
Okay. I have already sent my email to the director of SLDC expressing my concern about how it was released, but I encourage all of you to do the same if you feel that way. But evidently there is a copy of it floating around out there. I have not had time to really dig into it and get my arms around it, but it is out there. And then this afternoon at 2 o'clock, we have our financial analyst, I don't know what his official title is, Jonathan Ferry, who is here with us. Jonathan, what's your title? Financial analyst. Oh, okay. So he is our financial analyst from SLDC, and he will be conducting a workshop, as I understand it, it's a peer-reviewed workshop that he will share some of his thinking about how we might begin approaching using economic incentives or underwriting economics incentives, and it's going to be peer-reviewed with a number of members of our academic community from area universities, and that's going to happen at 2 o'clock this afternoon at St. Louis University. It's hosted by Professor Sarah Coffin, isn't it? Is that correct? Okay. Jonathan, if you could, what's the Drury, what was the name of the hall that it's going to be in?
DePere Hall,
204 DePere Hall, and it's probably going to be a fairly technical presentation that...
No, so we're going to kind of keep it on the more broad side, looking at the variables generally more than going into the math of it. We're going to probably have a secondary technical panel that goes into the details.
Okay. Well, that'll be occurring this afternoon at 2 o'clock, and anyone who is interested in that topic is welcome to attend and encouraged to attend. With that, then, let's see. How are we going to proceed today? Alderwoman Davis had requested that she advised me that she would be absent today. And is Alderwoman Hubbard here today? That because she is co-sponsoring these with Alderwoman Davis, and I was a little confused by Alderwoman Davis's email. So was Alderwoman Davis at one point going to handle Alderwoman Hubbard's?
I think that one went in first. I think she's made a request that there be some testimony taken
Okay, we're going to have a lot of that today. Okay, why don't we go ahead and then, since she's not present and, okay, why don't we just go ahead and hold them in numerical order then. Alderman Coatar is recognized, the alderman from the 7th Ward, to take up Board Bill number 27. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Board Bill 27 is a tax abatement bill for up to 25 years of tax abatement for a project known as Couples X on the surface parking lot south of the Westin Hotel downtown, across the street from Busch Stadium. This would be a $42.1 million construction of a Class A office building, a super high energy efficient building. You guys should have copies of some renderings on your desk. I believe it's a packet that looks like this. This is a project by the Coman Group. They're going to tell you more about the project in a few minutes. The hope is that if this project comes to fruition, it's going to create up to 348 new office jobs in the downtown business district, and also have a retail component as well. They'll explain to you sort of the process of this project and some of the other incentives they're going to be looking for from the state and other entities to make the numbers on this work. But today I just want to make sure we presented the project, let you all hear it, ask questions of the Coman Group and of SLDC. This would be, if this thing comes to fruition, this will be the first new construction of an office building downtown since Met Square in, I think, the late 80s. We haven't had any new construction in the Central Business District in quite a while. As I mentioned, this is sort of a cutting-edge project to be a net zero energy efficient building. They can explain to you more about that process. So today, my ask is that you listen, keep an open mind, and consider their request for up to 25 years of abatement for this project. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Giocas from Hush Blackwell, who's representing Coman Group, and Garrick Hamilton, I know, is also here to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Coatar. John Giocas from Hush Blackwell here on behalf of the Coman Group, which is an affiliate of the proposed developer of this project. Many of you are familiar, hopefully, with the Coman Group from their recent projects in the city of St. Louis. In the last 5 years, we've completed the redevelopment of the Couples 9 historic building, which now contains Osborne and Barr's headquarters, as well as office space for Asynchrony and the retail space commonly known as Flying Saucer. It's a 98% leased historic redevelopment. We're also proud to have recently completed the Euclid Gas, now Spire, building at 700 Market, the former Gen America building, which has been a terrific success for the city and for downtown. We have, as many of you might be aware and recall from last year, we have the 32 North Euclid development underway in the Central West End. And now we're very excited about this latest opportunity, which is Alderman Coatar accurately noted would be the first new Class A office building in downtown St. Louis in about 30 years by our estimation. This is a very unique project. We think it is economically a wonderful thing potentially for the city because of the new jobs that it will create, the office space that it'll create, which is really going to be unlike any office space that you can find downtown. So we do have other Class A office space downtown, but nothing like this will be. We also believe it's substantively and qualitatively a terrific project for the city. There are 2 net zero energy buildings in the Midwest currently. This is a design standard that's frankly higher than a LEED Platinum certification. Those 2 buildings, one is in Austin, Texas. The other is a schoolhouse, a public schoolhouse in Michigan. So this is very much cutting edge, as Alderman Coatar said, development that we think will speak to the kinds of tenants we're trying to attract to the city as a whole. It'll also, I think, represent some of the great things about the city of St. Louis and show that we're serious about green development and set an example for other developments here and regionally as well. For that reason, what we're asking for today is your approval of a board bill to approve a blighting study and a redevelopment plan under the LCRA Act that would allow for up to 25 years of tax abatement. I realize that's a significant request, but we believe that this is obviously a significant project, and we believe it's worthy of your support. As you all are aware, there's several projects that, contain the incentive of 23 years of property taxes through TIF. We didn't feel that TIF was the appropriate mechanism here, and there may be additional incentives that we need later on, but the first step in what's somewhat of a lengthy LCRA process is approval of this blighting study and the up to 25 years of tax abatement request. Garrick Hamilton from the Coman Group, the developers, here with me, and we're happy to answer any questions, but we, again, appreciate your time and your support and are very excited about this terrific project.
How many square feet was the building? 87,000 with 3,000.
It's about 90,000 combined rentable square feet.
You have 94 parking spaces. I usually think of 4 people per 1,000, so that's about 200 under, is that right?
Yes.
How do you figure making that up?
I'll let Garrick answer that question in a little more detail, but I think part of what I was referring to in this being a green development, this will be, I think it's fair to say, as transit-oriented a development as we've seen in the city for some time. Garrick can speak to the specifics on the parking in the neighborhood because we believe it's sufficient. But
We're very proud to answer that question. Good afternoon, morning, I guess it would be, Chairman and committee members. We just completed the 700 Market redevelopment project, and that project contained all of 2 parking spaces on that building.
Project was that?
The Cle Gas, now
Oh, the
Spire
old,
headquarters,
General
that has
American
2 parking spaces in it total. We are quite confident in the transportation-oriented district aspect or development aspect of this project, that we've estimated around 8,500 parking spaces within about 2.5 blocks of this building between Stadium West, the parking lots to the south of 40, as well as the city treasurer's garage, as well as other spaces within the very nearby area. We are confident that we can park this project without additional parking beyond the convenience, what I would consider convenience parking that we've listed in the development plan.
And then the 25-year, that is, what, full for 10 and half for 15, is that?
no, it's full for 25, up to. We're still discussing these incentives with SLDC and the LCRA, and we'll need to go back to the LCRA to be approved designated developer. But again, the 25 years of full abatement we consider to be somewhat comparable to a 23-year full TIF.
And so you're not expecting this passed out of committee today then, is that right? Or-
No, we are. As you may be aware, the LCRA Chapter 99 process requires that we bring this bill to you for your approval of the bill and the blighting study that's attached. Then the LCRA has to designate someone, which we obviously hope will be us, as the developer of this project and authorize the entrance of a redevelopment agreement. So we're asking you to pass this out of committee, and we hope to be at the LCRA in June or July, most likely July. In between that time, the LCRA Act also requires that we go to the Plan Commission.
So you're saying that it has to be passed out of committee today before it's heard by LCRA?
It's been heard by the LCRA once. The LCRA process, again, is a 2-step process. The first is approval of a plan. The second is a designation of a developer. So the plan is here today that authorizes up to 25 years of tax abatement. The LCRA then makes that determination whether it's 10 or 19 or 25.
And then, so they actually, so you sign an agreement with them that
Yes, sir.
then
Yep.
codifies that as opposed, so we,
You authorize the up to 25 years, yes, sir.
and then they negotiate, the theory is. Could you help me out a little bit? I saw a study just actually yesterday that showed that downtown office market was the weakest in the region with, I don't know, 16, 17% vacancy. I'm sure a lot of that was B or C space, but what's the downtown vacancy rate for Class A space at this point?
I think it depends on what you classify as Class A, and I'm not a broker. But I think that I think the real question that's behind your question is, we think that there will be demand for this space. This is unlike anything, Frank, again, that you'd find in the city. This is unlike the space that you find in Met Square, which I would consider a Class A. It's unlike the space that's at the US Bank Plaza. It's really unique. And Garrett, maybe you could talk about how you guys have come to the idea that there's a demand for this.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, what we've come to that conclusion is really, we have now had two projects that we would consider to be Class A, but then also Class A unique space. And what we have found in our programming, and when we're talking to the tenant market, is there is definitely a demand for unique, call it creative, call it entrepreneurial class type Class A space in downtown St. Louis, and I think probably throughout St. Louis. So that is the key of this. This will not, in our opinion, compete with Market Square, or excuse me, Met Square of other Class A offices in downtown, because it is different. The tenant that is looking at this space is very likely, most likely, not looking at leasing space in those buildings, which is more of a traditional Class A office building. This is going to be for an entrepreneurial class, creative class type project.
And if I could just
Yeah,
add,
yeah,
Garrett,
yeah.
your experience leasing Couples 9, which is,
Yeah, I'll correct you on one thing. We are now 100% leased.
Sorry, I think I said 98 earlier. I
We were
apologize.
joined by the good people at Frownshoe about a month ago.
But our experience there has been that there's a demand for tenants who want to be in this neighborhood, and they want, again, that unique space. There is some great historic product, but unfortunately, historic buildings, as beautiful as many of us feel they are, aren't perfect for every tenant, and especially in some of the high-tech sectors and roles that we're trying to attract.
Yeah, I could give a very long-winded oration on something that I'm sure your committee members do not have time or nor want to hear my opinion on, but this is really trying to identify and recruit the entrepreneurial class and the new businesses that T-Rex, CET, other incubation companies have worked very hard to do and create an environment downtown St. Louis. It's to grab those companies as they're graduating from those incubator levels and keep them in downtown, quite frankly, and keep them in areas where they want to be and where they can recruit, not just in St. Louis, and that's actually a major key part of this overall incentive package that we'll be requesting from the St. Louis, is this is going to help those businesses recruit from Silicon Valley, Boston, Chicago, and other towns to come to St. Louis and be downtown as part of that environment. They don't want to be I think it was the congressman from North St. Louis. They don't want to be in a cornfield. They want to be in downtown St. Louis. They want to be here and recruiting to young people and educated people that want to be in downtown St. Louis. So,
Let me kind of play a little devil's advocate with you, because I'd like to hear your take on this, because it's something I wrestle with as I think about the incentive program, and something that I've discussed with lots of people. When we're offering these incentives, to what extent are we feeling that we're not competing with ourselves? In other words, we're providing you incentives, and aren't we, in essence, just cannibalizing other office space in downtown St. Louis?
Let me take a stab at that, because we've heard that question. It's a terrific question, sir, honestly. I think there's a couple facets to that. Number one, again, we don't feel that this is competitive really with anything else that's in downtown St. Louis, and frankly, the rents that we're asking are above, to my knowledge, pretty much everything else in St. Louis, or what I would consider market for even the top spaces in downtown. So I think that this is really a space that's designed to either attract new tenants or who currently aren't in the city, or to provide a space for emerging companies that have reached a level of maturation that doesn't fit in an incubator or doesn't fit in a startup space.
provide two additional assurances. One, this abatement that we're in front of you today on is just one piece of the puzzle. Obviously, there's a significant additional component that will be a part of this project as well that we'll have to be back in front of this committee to request approval for as well. And that package is going to have to include the involvement of state incentive packages that will require net new jobs, not just to the city of St. Louis, but the state of Missouri. And the sales pitch for that project really is going to companies that are not only here in St. Louis, or in the St. Louis region, Kansas City, and the Midwest, but going to a lot of companies and saying, peel off individuals that you want to create as, or want to attract to a location like this and allow them to be creative and recruit to this location. We believe this will be a poster child-like project for the city of St. Louis, and specifically a poster-like project for downtown St. Louis.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open this up to a couple questions, and then Alderman Conway left on. Alderman Bosley?
No questions.
Alderman Kennedy had asked to be excused today. Alderman Conway is not present. Alderwoman Cruzen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, do we have any of the economics on this project today?
Yes, there's a board bill with a redevelopment plan attached, which I think includes the sources and uses and a pro forma financial statement. But I can walk you through the basic economics.
If that's
Okay.
okay.
We need another one of these.
This one down here.
I appreciate that there hasn't been a new building in downtown for many, many years, so it would be good to have this. This is a pretty small building, though, 90,000 square feet, thanks to. And since I didn't get this, what is the rent per square foot on this building?
We're very aggressively going to be marketing this for over $30 a foot. This is going to be a Clayton-like rent structure that we're going to have to demand. And if I can put it very succinctly, this is a project that is going to require
I'm
a
not
tenant.
sure we want a Clayton-like building.
No, and I don't want to, and we hope that the design that you're seeing in front of you does not represent that. This is going to require a commitment not only from private capital in our ownership group, obviously the city's request, and we absolutely respect that this request for up to 25 years of tax abatement is not a small request, but it's also going to require a commitment from a private corporation tenant or entrepreneurial company that is going to be able to absorb those kind of rents. It is,
Do you have a tenant yet?
no, I do not.
Will you start construction before you have a?
No, we will not.
tenant? Okay, so this is sort of speculative.
At this point, yes.
Point of speculative, so are you marketing this? I saw it in Business Journal and various places.
Right.
Are you marketing this project?
We are speaking through the channels that we normally communicate on, identifying new tenants for a project like this. They are not, I would not consider them traditional marketing. It is definitely C-suite conversations between our principal and members of those tenants.
And so, what you mentioned, or one of you mentioned that, you hope this is a Silicon Valley company or something like that, some very desirable company. If a St. Louis company moves to this building from a couple of blocks away, will they also get the advantage of the 25 years of tax abatement?
More realistically, this project and how we're going to market this is going to companies, and these companies have no affiliation with this project whatsoever. I just want to be absolutely clear about that. But it's going to be going to companies like MasterCard that are in O'Fallon, Missouri, going to companies like Ed Jones that might be out in the suburbs, or going to companies of their similar ilk in Chicago and other nearby towns, and saying, don't peel off 150 people. Peel off 3 that you want to create a creative design group and have them come here and recruit to that. And so it would be net new jobs, and my incentive would have to be net new jobs.
And so if the company is currently in the city of St. Louis, and they move there, they're still going to get the advantage of the 25 years of tax abatement because it's baked into the rent rate.
They would, yes. I would say that the project is actually probably getting the benefit of that because they're already paying top of the market, if not higher than top of the market rate. So they're really not getting that incentive other than they're in a building that they can be in.
I think the problem is that these companies who locate here are also going to want services.
Fair enough.
They're going to want police services, they're going to want fire department, they're going to want services. And if they don't pay taxes for 25 years, it's hard for us to provide services.
Fair.
So that's really the struggle here.
Understood. And the overall incentive package obviously will have to be presented to you at a later date, and that's, I think, the time where we can have that very germane and appropriate conversation.
So the overall, this 25 years is just the start of what you need to do this
Correct.
project. What else do you need? What else will you be coming back to us with?
We are trying to put that together at this time. We've been working with SLDC, Mr. Ferry, and those groups, and I'm trying very, very eagerly to identify, because it's not going to be just a local package that'll be able to make this happen. It's going to have to require us finding a way to involve state incentive programs like Missouri Build, Missouri Works, and other programming.
Why is that? I mean, it's a 90,000 square foot building. That's not very big.
It is not, but we are trying to deliver a building that is going to be a marquee level type building. We could put tilt-up suburban construction on this thing, put a Walgreens on this sucker, probably in a heartbeat, and it wouldn't be something that the city of St. Louis would be proud of. It wouldn't show what downtown St. Louis is rapidly becoming and turning the tide of, and in terms of really hosting a lot of entrepreneurial community. I don't think it's something that the city would be proud of. I could put a much cheaper building on this thing. I don't think anybody wants to do that, though.
I don't think people do want to do that, but you know, it's hard to vote on 25 years of tax abatement without knowing what else you're going to be back here for,
Absolutely.
without seeing the full picture. Really, you're saying that you can put a state-of-the-art building on this site, but really it's the taxpayers, especially you're going to go to the state and you're going to come here and you're going to have other incentives.
Yeah, and these are good questions. I think,
Incentives
Yes.
at some level, but 25 years of full tax abatement for a 90,000 square foot building. I mean, SLDC is recommending this, correct? Or we wouldn't be here, I guess.
yeah, I'll let them answer. I don't want to speak for SLDC.
I think it's important that the up to be there, because we're still in negotiations what this is going to wind up being. And a lot of it depends on, we might try and tweak the location exact, you know, in a few feet one way or another of the building, and a number of things that might affect whether 25 is the final number. And as was talked about, there are other incentives that, you know, are in the discussion that we need to come to conclusion on. So we thought this would be a first step, and then we can hopefully narrow it down, and maybe when we get finished, it'll be 23 years or 20 years, or who knows what it might be, but hopefully we can either reduce some other incentives or reduce this when the final package is put together.
What's the total development cost?
The total development cost right now is right around 45 million, we believe. Alderwoman, if I could just take 1 second to address your question. I think that what we're talking, yeah, no,
On something, we don't know what it is, we don't know how much more it's going to be. So
Yeah.
that's where
and I understand, right,
you know, I want your project to happen, I want downtown to have much better options for office space, which right now,
yeah.
are nil, but we also just had a building 3 weeks ago in downtown, 300,000 square feet, 1010 Market, sold for $22 a square foot, 7.67 or something like that $1 million for this humongous office building right next to all the courthouses. Parking. Or enough parking, whatever. But, so.
And let me just give you a little bit of background on where we're coming from, because I'd like to be here saying I need X, Y, and Z. I am happy to answer any of your questions about the numbers and where the project is right now. As Garrick alluded, we've been in discussions with officials at the state level about how they can support the project. I do think it's worth noting that right now, all we're asking for, and I don't mean that to sound as though it's light, but to say that you have it's 25 years of tax abatement, but if we were to be able to build this project with only 25 years of tax abatement, which in the interest of full disclosure, we can't, right? I think under you know, my view, that would be a terrific thing for the city in the overall economics, because then we'd be paying, you know, earnings tax and payroll taxes, we'd be paying personal property taxes, you know, you'd be receiving the benefit of all the retail sales taxes that would accrue from having office workers downtown and in this part of downtown. So I think if we were just asking for the property tax today, which is really all we're doing and all we're asking you to do, I think there's a host of other taxes that would support the services that you're describing. The reason, again, that we have to be here doing this now is because we have to go to the Plan Commission and we have to go back to the LCRA just to get the tax abatement piece moving. While we're going through the rest of that process, we're going to be back to you hopefully in the next few weeks with a more specific request as to those other incentives. And at that time, you know, we hope you would say to us, well, we think this is a great project, we think the numbers bear it out, we think, we can conclude that, this package is right. But again, today, with just the 25 years tax abatement, not that that's a light request, that's what we need to get this ball rolling.
And so the total value for 25 years of this abatement, is it 8.7 million? But I'm just looking at this for the first time, sorry.
John, you came up with the 8.7, right?
Yeah, why don't we just take a couple minutes? We probably should develop a process for all these things, and I think the best thing to do is after we hear from the developers, that we spend a couple minutes and provide Jonathan a chance to walk us through the numbers.
Okay.
So
No
why don't
further
we kind of,
questions. That's okay, I don't have any further questions, that's good.
are you sure?
Yeah.
I-
I've had enough. You've had enough of me. That's fine.
You will have
Well, I
another
think it's
opportunity to-
appropriate that we all take a look at the numbers at some point, but why don't we have a couple of members we're going to be losing here in a couple of minutes, and I'm concerned about the quorum, so why don't we go ahead and get through some of the other members. Alderman Moore is not here. Alderman Davis asked to be excused. Alderman French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this land is right next to Bush Stadium, right? It's across the street from Bush
Across
Stadium?
the street, yes, sir.
Okay. And who currently owns the land?
Not us.
It's an entity that's basically the former remnants of the development group that did the Westin Hotel. So it's the same partnership, McCormick, Bear, and Son of Mary.
And they operate a parking lot right there?
It is a parking lot that serves the Westin, correct. It actually parks on there. We're going to have to work with the LCRA and potentially relocate those parking, and obviously work with the Westin, relocate that parking.
And you plan to purchase that for about $2.8 million or $2.9 million? Is that what this
I
is?
believe that's the number, yeah. Sounds right.
Okay. All right. And so this bill asks us to label the land across the street from Bush Stadium as blighted?
Correct.
Okay. All right. The total value of the abatement is 8.7, is that right? I see on one of these pages, it says the fiscal impact of the tax abatement, 8.7 million. Then it also has a special business district spreadsheet here. Can somebody explain that second spreadsheet?
I'll let SLDC do that. I didn't prepare that sheet.
Special business district, total payments, 2.8 million.
We're still paying our downtown special business district, CID. Right, our special assessment, that's probably what that is referring to. Obviously, Alderman, I didn't prepare that either, but I suspect that that's what that is.
Yeah, the abatement doesn't preclude them from paying it.
The downtown CID.
So they would still pay 2.8 million into the downtown CID over the 25 years. Okay. Okay. All right. And so in your assumptions here about, you say you were going to try to get about $30 a square foot. You don't have a tenant yet?
No, we don't.
So how do you know it's going to create 348 jobs?
That is a metric by which we're looking at the typical office occupancy of a building like this, is usually roughly around 4 per 1,000 of the square feet. And so at 90,000 rentable square feet would yield about 360 jobs for that location.
Okay, but that's just an
Not have a
estimate.
tenant that I can tell
based
you absolutely,
on
yeah, I do
nothing.
not have that, unfortunately.
Okay, and I see a number here that says 6 new retail, and then 20K next to that. What is that?
Those are, I think, also as well, typical, underlying assumptions based upon we are going to have about 3,000 square feet of retail jobs per square foot of a retail location. John, do you?
And we,
can you-
similarly, Alderman, we don't have a retail tenant, but I think that's a somewhat conservative assumption based on, what you see in industry literature about how many jobs per 1,000 square feet you should assume for retail. The rule of thumb that I've been told, which can vary depending on the exact type of office space and retail space, is that it's generally, I think Alderman, Chairman Roddy alluded to this earlier, 4 per 1,000 for office space and 2 per 1,000 for retail. But
Okay.
that can fluctuate much higher on the office side.
And would that be retail to serve the surrounding neighborhoods or retail to serve the people who work in the building?
Our thought is a little both. Our thought is it's probably going to be something along the lines of a coffee location, maybe a small sandwich shop, something that would serve not just the building, but, because I don't think you would be able to survive just on the building, but the neighborhood around it, absolutely.
Okay. I'm also concerned that we don't have a full package here of all the incentives you're asking for. It's hard to really weigh this without knowing the total incentives that you're asking for, be it at the state level or the local level.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Again, you certainly will have the bite at that apple. The purpose of that, sort of the
But is it
bifurcation-
impossible to present that before we vote on this?
Is it impossible?
Yeah,
It's not possible, right?
not possible.
I don't know if it's
So you don't
physically
even have
impossible, but we're
you don't
not.
even have an idea of the incentives that you're seeking?
We do, and we've been in discussions with SLDC, we've been in discussions with officials at the state level about what those might involve. I don't think that we have yet put together a package based upon what's available at the state level and the local level.
Well, if you don't know your other incentives, how do you know what to ask for from us? Is that why you asked for the maximum from us?
In part, yes. We believe that we need at least 25 years of tax abatement under any of the scenarios we've run, and we've run several, as to how this project might be able to work. I think under all those scenarios, we've been assuming that we need at least 25 years of tax abatement. Yes, sir.
Okay, so why do you need so much incentive? I mean, that's prime real estate there. So is it that you need so much incentive to build the building that you want to build? Or is it you think you need incentives to build any kind of a building next to Busch Stadium?
I think, as Mr. Hamilton alluded to, we're not out to build any kind of building. We think that this is a unique opportunity. I should also add, and I think I alluded to this earlier, this is a developer that is invested in this part of downtown specifically. So we have a greater concern about what gets built here than perhaps almost anyone else, given our very substantial investments in Couples 9 and given our very substantial investments at Euclid Gas, which were both projects where we spent literally tens or dozens of millions of dollars.
Okay.
But to answer, I think your question was, do we need the incentive to build the building we want to build, or do we need the incentive to build any building? I think you're, correct me if I'm wrong, you could build a building here without any incentive. We're not sure who that would attract, and I don't think we'd be willing to do that, to take that risk.
My goal is that this is a building we want to build, and when I say we, that it's not just us, it's also obviously the city of St. Louis. That's something you and your colleagues are going to be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so getting back to what was mentioned earlier about demand, as we both know, there's a lot of vacant real estate downtown. Retail, hotel, office. Okay, so you're creating a new building, adding more square footage to the market downtown. Are you increasing demand or just increasing supply?
We think that there's demand for this type of space. I think the market has spoken clearly that there's not demand for, as Alderman Roddy said, B and C type space, but we think that there is demand for this type of unique Class A space.
So let me just ask you.
We're creating supply, obviously. That's, if you're looking at
Sure.
supply-demand curve in that regard, we are creating supply, which we believe there is an untapped demand for. We found that whenever, we kind of faced a similar situation with Couples 9. That building, I will tell you, we were split down the middle internally on whether or not we could do that building. Obviously, we had a great partner in Osborne and Barr who was willing to come in and step up and take 50% of that building. But even with that, we looked at it and said, can we really recruit down here? It's downtown St. Louis. We've got the vacancy rates that the chairman brought up as well. We found that when you create that unique product type, that Class A, call it creative space, there is a demand in St. Louis in businesses and that are coming to it already, and then add to that the successes that we're seeing and starting to see coming out of Center for Emerging Technologies and T-Rex and other groups like those. We're seeing that demand is there, but you've got to provide that supply to get it there. So.
Okay, so you mentioned that potential candidates, tenants for this building might come from some of these technology and entrepreneurial ventures that are going on in the city. Besides downtown, would this compete with those things?
I don't believe so, and that's obviously probably going to be very, a very personal statement in that regard, because we think we're going to provide something that's very unique. That is the goal, is to go to companies like that. But as I mentioned, with the rents that we're looking for, again, full disclosure, this company is not affiliated with it. We are looking for the companies like the Asynchrony Solutions that isn't dripping off of a lot of people's mouths in the city of St. Louis, but is a company that is now in its second round of private capital, and they are creating jobs at a rate in downtown St. Louis that we couldn't keep up with. We wanted to put more of their employees into Couples 9. I just couldn't add another floor to it. That is a wonderful success story, and I think we're starting to see those success stories in the city of St. Louis, and we want to provide those guys with a place to stay in the city of St. Louis, and specifically, that company wanted to be downtown. It's probably the best analogy I can get.
Well, thanks for your answers. I think when it comes down to incentives and what we are providing incentives for as a city, we have to look, as was mentioned, whether or not we're competing with ourselves. We have a lot of vacancy already. We have to look to see if it is better for the city for us to incentivize maybe making some of the existing vacant space more attractive versus creating new vacant space that competes with that existing vacant space. And then, just as a city, I think we need to start looking at, how fair is it to constantly create these incentives that allow developers to basically pay lower tax rates than grandmas in the city. After a while...
That's absolutely fair. And I understand what you're saying in that regard. And I'm hoping that with our disclosure of the full economic package to the SLDC, and we're working through this, and as Mr. Jokas raised earlier, you will have another bite at me on this project. Absolutely. We will not be able to develop this project with just the abatement. So you will have another package, and I appreciate the fact you'd like to vote on everything at once. In light of the timing and us trying to find identified tenants, we'd like to be able to get this part at least as the baseline for the project, and then be able to come back to you with our progress on tenants, come back to you with the economic package, and be able to have certain terms for that. And I can assure you SLDC will be negotiating very adamantly on some of these construction or these restrictions that you're looking at. But at the end of the day, looking at the overall package, while the project may be paying less in terms of taxes as you raise, the overall economic return to the financial investment from us as well as the city of St. Louis is what you should be focusing on as well. It's not the lowering of the tax number. Dollars are fungible in terms of these analyses on these projects. You should be looking at
Yeah, but the
controlling that.
problem is that we don't have all the
appropriate.
information to make an informed decision on that. So you estimate that you may have 300 or so employees there. You don't have a tenant, so we don't know exactly what that number is. And you don't know if it's just people moving from existing locations to other locations. We don't have any assurances
But I can-
yet
but I
that
can
it
tell
would be
you-
completely new employees.
I apologize for cutting you off, Alderman. But you will have, as part of this package, we are going to have to assure the state of Missouri for their incentive package that we are bringing net new jobs to the state
But
of Missouri.
what incentive package? We don't have it.
I understand, and that's what we
I
will.
don't have that assurance yet because I don't even know what tax credits you're
Fair enough,
going
sorry.
for and
Let me-
what the stipulations are at the state level.
Yep, and fair question. Here's, I think, part of the answer to your question is, right now, what we're asking you to do is incentivize the construction of a building. Not any building, a building that we think is very unique, and we're agreeing that we'll build it to be this unique building. We're not asking you to give us 25 years of tax abatement to put up something that's less, right? We can't tell you who our tenants are because we don't have them. And I would be asking the same questions if I were in your position. But I think the way that we could perhaps think about this, and maybe should think about this is an incentive for this real estate development rather than an incentive to attract the jobs. Because I think you all have to take a leap of faith, or maybe leap of faith isn't the right word, but you have to make a decision or determination that this is the kind of project, if it's built, that will attract the types of office users that we want to encourage to locate to St. Louis. And I think there was an allusion to that in the study that Alderman Roddy mentioned at the outset of this meeting that said that that's one of the things the city should be focusing on in the deployment of its incentives, is attracting high-skilled, high-wage users. We think that this is a building that will attract that kind of user. And we're asking you to agree with us on that front. We hope to be able to tell you more about other incentives that we need that will speak to the exact users who are here. And I don't know at which point we'll have those defined, but we have, Mr. Coleman, I should say, has to take a substantial amount of risk on this project, and we're asking for your support in taking that risk by approving the tax payment that then mitigates our risk over that 25-year period. Doesn't eliminate it. We still have to build a $45 million project, and we're not asking for any guarantees, or we're not asking for any direct subsidies that alleviate that risk. We're asking for a tax abatement that mitigates the risk to build that physical asset.
No other questions, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I realize there's still a lot of questions about this and probably need a clearer picture on some of the other incentives and other details of the project. So I would ask if we could just hold this in committee. And, you know, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, for purposes of public hearing, though, we should provide opportunities of anybody who signed up to speak on it to be able to speak. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk? I need to provide that opportunity. Is that?
Correct. No one has signed up to speak.
No one has signed up to speak? Okay. So we will then consider that bill heard for the sake of a public hearing's sake. And then, actually, on the letter that I was looking at, I went out of order. That was Board Bill number 27. I actually have 125 with the Coleman Group here, and it is... Dale, are you able to handle Board Bill 25? This is an amendment, or a slight change of a board bill that we already passed regarding 32 North Euclid. Can you speak to that and explain?
It's a very simple item.
What I'm trying to do is rush through so we can get a vote while we still have...
Well, you still have a quorum.
So I apologize for everybody if I'm cutting to the chase here, but this is a relatively...
This is a TIF bill, and the bill required signature of the redevelopment agreement within a certain period of time. That did not occur, and so it's simply extending the time to sign the redevelopment agreement. I understand the developer is ready to sign it today if we need to, and this will also be on the E&A agenda this afternoon because in order to extend that time, it requires E&A's approval. So it's a very simple bill, and it doesn't change the terms of anything. And this is another project that the Colemans have out at 32 North Euclid. So it's obviously a project we're excited about. They've already demolished existing buildings, and they're beginning work on the site on that property, and that should be a wonderful new addition there. So I think there shouldn't be any concern about it at all, but I'd be happy to answer any questions and on it if you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions, Alderman Bosley?
No questions.
Alderwoman Cruzen, any questions? Alderman French, any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Carter, any questions? Alderman Coatar, any questions?
No questions.
Alderwoman Spencer, any questions?
No questions.
Alderwoman Green, any questions?
Questions.
Hearing no questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 25 with the due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Bosley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Cruzen?
Aye.
Alderman French?
Aye.
Alderman Carter?
Aye.
Alderman Coatar?
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer? Alderwoman Green?
Aye.
Chairman Roddy?
Aye.
We have 8 ayes and 0 noes.
Dale, if we could, if you could provide some clarification for me, because I'm a little confused by Alderwoman Davis's message. Was she going to take up one of Alderwoman Tamika's, Alderwoman Hubbard's bills?
It's
or-
my understanding that because neither of them can be here today, that she would like you to essentially open the public hearing, make sure there's no one here to speak to the bills, and then again continue it to next week when apparently they're available.
So that would be her bill as well as the two bills that Alderwoman Hubbard is the primary
Correct,
sponsor of.
exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then we'll hold off on that until, we'll provide, we'll ask the Alderman from the 7th to retake the podium as he has another board bill.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's anyone present to speak on those bills you might want to verify.
No one has signed up.
Okay, okay.
No, so we,
The public has
okay.
signed up.
So then we
do we
can
have to
con-
take any action at all? What I was going to do is,
Other than to announce
Okay.
that we are going to take it up again
okay,
next week at the next meeting scheduled for the 25th.
okay. Well, we'll
Okay,
do that in
thank
a
you.
second here, then let's
Okay.
provide it. And I'm going to recognize Alderman Coatar and I try to avoid having public messy meetings here. And Alderman Coatar and I have had I would call it somewhat of I wouldn't say a disagreement. I think we're both doing our jobs, but we've had some sort of disagreement about the appropriate way of moving on this for about a year now, and I am very grateful in that he has been, that we've come to terms so that we don't have to go ahead and get messy with all this. But I want to go ahead and give a little background to get a sense of what's happened. And I had a developer active in my ward that owned a number of pieces of properties, and when 2008 came by, they slowed down their development for a few years, and then when they came back, the market had gotten stronger, and we had been in the position of kind of systematically reducing the amount of incentives. They weren't particularly happy with it, and so they haven't, I guess, done much with their property over there. That's not to say that they're bad people. They've actually been a constructive influence, I think, in that neighborhood and in the city, but we had a bit of a disagreement, and in the process, they are now pursuing a hotel in downtown, and I felt that it was probably inappropriate for us to incentivize a hotel downtown when they own vacant property out in a neighborhood, and so we've been kind of going back and forth on the appropriate way of dealing with that, because we don't want to stop an important project for downtown, but we want to make sure that we have developers that are attentive to this. So we have been kind of working, we've developed a schedule for the properties to be dealt with. And so we're going to hear this today, and we're still working out the details of what we hope will be a side agreement on that. But I just want to publicly thank the Alderman from the 7th, because I know one of the most uncomfortable aspects of being down here is when you have two different aldermen that approach you and ask you to get in the middle of their disagreement, and we've been able to avoid that, I think. And so, bodes an important question as we consider incentives and all these things. Should we be providing incentives for property for one project when there's other projects that perhaps the developer owns and isn't doing anything with? In this case, I have had some disagreements with the developer, but I think that they are a constructive force in St. Louis, and they've made real contributions in the past. It's just that on this issue, I've had a disagreement with them, and the bottom line is we were able to resolve it. We're going to hear this today, hold it in committee until we finalize that, but I just wanted to express his willingness to become involved in this and help us work through this. So, Alderman, why don't you go ahead and take us through Board Bill number 28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board Bill 28 is asking you guys to approve a blighting study and redevelopment plan for 705 Olive, authorizing 20 years of tax abatement. 705 Olive, to put in perspective, is the building with the Pickles Deli downtown on the corner of 7th and Olive. It's a Louis Sullivan building, one of two Louis Sullivan buildings in St. Louis, the other one being the Wainwright building. It's a very historic building by a very famous architect.
Oh, did we take, yeah, we have a vote, right?
Built in 1892. So the plan for 705 Olive is a boutique hotel under the Marriott Autograph Collection, as well as some residential apartments on the top floors, and obviously a restaurant on the first floor as well. Restoration St. Louis, headed by Amy and Amrit Gill. Representatives of Restoration St. Louis are here today to tell you more about this. This project, to give some context, this building is sort of sandwiched between several large vacant buildings in our central business district. We've got the chemical building immediately to the west of this building, and to the east, the over 1 million square feet of vacant space in the Railway Exchange building, which used to house Macy's and a number of other businesses. So the hope here is by getting 705 rolling and getting this project going, this will help sort of spur development along that stretch of downtown where we would really like to see those buildings come back to life. This project's about a $46 million project. It's going to require both federal and state historic tax credits, a SID and a TDD, which have been already passed out of the Ways and Means Committee, and potentially a sales tax rebate as well. Today, though, we're just here on the abatement portion of this bill. With that, so just, acquisition costs, and I don't know what everyone has in front of them. I think that's something, I've got this sheet. I don't know if you guys have this one from SLDC. Acquisition costs about $3.5 million. Again, the total construction cost about $46 million for this project. And it's estimated that it will create 150 full and part-time jobs in downtown. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to, I guess, who am I turning it over to? To John Giocas again from Hush Blackwell, who's representing the Gills in this matter. And as the Alderman or the Chairman mentioned, I am not asking for a vote on this today. We're still working out some other issues relating to some other properties owned by the developer. But I would just like to have an opportunity for public comment and for you guys to ask questions of me and the developer. So thank you.
Alderman, thank you. Members of the committee, Chairman, good morning. I think Alderman Coatar provided a terrific summary. We're very excited about this project, which both from a real estate perspective fills in a significant hole in downtown St. Louis. This is one of the key undeveloped historic buildings that we have in the downtown core, and we think from a real estate perspective is very important to the continued development of downtown. Also, this project, perhaps more importantly, adds a significant asset to the city's hotel portfolio, and it's one that's, we believe, currently underserved. We know that there are hotels in downtown, but this is a unique property that will be unlike anything else that's currently downtown, and we think will serve a very important function for downtown as it continues to try to attract the types of business that it needs to sustain. I think, again, Alderman Coatar reviewed the key financial aspects of the project with you, but we're happy to answer any additional questions.
Alderman Bosley, any questions?
No, none. Jenny's ward.
Alderman Cruzen?
And review the abatement on this,
20 years of abatement.
20 years full,
Yes.
plus other, obviously, historic tax credits.
Yes.
You're expecting to come back for, a 1 cent SID and a 1 cent TID?
The 1 cent SID and the 1 cent TID were approved by Ordinance 70268, I believe. Yeah.
Alderman French?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So total project costs close to $46 million. Acquisition cost $3.56. Has the property already been acquired?
Has the property already been acquired? We do own it, yes.
Yeah, so, okay, they own it now. The other incentives, HEC, CID, TDD, et cetera, is there a breakdown here of the total value of all these incentives or the?
Again, I believe it's attached to the board bill is is the blighting study and plan, which.
I looked through it, I'm not sure if I see what I'm looking for, which is the value of each of those things, basically just a,
Sources and we need to standardize this stuff.
So I
could
can
not-
provide you with
Somebody
one.
said there was a sources and uses on the previous bill, and I couldn't find a sources and uses
I
on
think
that.
I think it's not a traditional sources and uses, but it's referred to in the text, but I can provide one here. What,
is it somewhere around there? I mean, if I can have it in writing, that'd be great. I know we're not voting on this today, so before we vote on it, it'd be good to have that. Just kind of what the value is of the HTC, the CID, the TDD, the tax abatement, owner equity, and the private loan,
yeah, so the,
how that 45 million breaks down.
I can give you those numbers, and I can get this to you in writing too, but
Okay,
just for
good
the
job.
record, I think our projection currently is that the historic investment would yield approximately $8 million in capital for the project. The state historics would yield $9.7 million in capital for the project, and the CID valuation with coverage, the CID is approximately the CID and the TDD combined are just north of $2 million.
2 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the tax abatement value was, what? Yeah, 7. All right. Quite a bit of incentive there, all right. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Green?
I guess I have a little bit, maybe more of a comment than anything. I did over the weekend have the opportunity to go through the tax incentive study that a few of us were able to get our hands on. And one of the recommendations from that study is that these types of tax incentives should be not utilized on projects where we're creating predominantly retail or low-wage jobs. So can you speak to, I guess, given this is a hotel and a restaurant, and can you speak to the average wage of the folks that'll be, of these jobs that are being created, and
Well, I think that was a comment. In terms of the average wage, I don't have a figure on the tips of my fingers, but we do have traditional hotel management jobs. And Gary, I don't know if you want to chime in there, but I should say I don't think the studies, as Alderman Roddy mentioned earlier, have been fully vetted yet. I'm looking forward to our session this afternoon and have a chance to discuss it more thoroughly. But do you have a number?
Yeah, so there's a number of jobs that occur at a hotel, of course. Judging from our Hotel Blackhawk in Davenport, Iowa, which is a very similar project, the jobs range between part-time work, starting at $8, $9, but go all the way up to about $80,000 to $90,000 a year. The great thing about a hotel is a lot of these entry-level jobs allow opportunities for for advancement. So a lot of the members that have the full-time salaried positions, 50, 60,000, start off as bellhops. So we think that's a lot of jobs, not just for low-income workers, but a lot of opportunities for those workers as well.
But have you done a kind of a breakdown in terms of this is how many minimum wage workers versus living wage workers versus, real good $50,000 a year jobs?
I personally don't have those numbers, but I can pull them together from
When you
what's
come
been
before
going
us the
on in
next time.
Davenport, Iowa. Absolutely.
Okay. I would appreciate that. No further questions.
Alderman from 28th?
You requested just a minute ago that we standardize some of the information that's attached here. And if I could just follow on to that. Thank you. I don't actually know who prepared any of this. There's part of it is just the printout format, makes it hard to read, but, it's hard to figure out what project it is, who prepared it, sort of who's standing behind these numbers. I think that would be helpful for us if we could get that, as long as we're trying to standardize things.
Yeah, I think what we want to do is, and please help me because I tend to be a little bit absent-minded if you haven't noticed. when we have these, I think we want to hear about the project itself. So if we kind of had an agenda for before we start asking questions amongst all of us, but we have an overview of the project from the developer. I think it's appropriate that the developer
Great.
share their vision of what they're trying to accomplish. But I think the next step of that should be, you know, our person who's reviewed the numbers from our format and provides us, you know, sources and uses and a cash flow statement and, you know, whatever else we come up with. And then we should probably open it up to questions at that point. And so that should be out in front of us, and it needs to be attached to the bills, you know, or, you know, maybe not attached to the bills, but it should be an exhibit that's on everybody's place up here before we go ahead and start hearing bills in the future. And it's just something that, you know, we shouldn't even be voting on any of this stuff without that before us. So, Jonathan, if you could, you know, I would welcome you to either get with myself or the Alderwoman from the 28th to try to come up with something that we would be standard. And just remind me, when we start having these hearings, I'm expecting that exhibit be on everybody's, you know, or else we have a PowerPoint that we can walk through. But, you know, everybody ought to see those numbers before the first questions asked up here. Okay. If there's no other questions, we're going to hold, we've had a request to hold that in committee. And then procedurally, I'm supposed to go ahead and we've acknowledged that there is no one to speak on behalf of Board Bill 3545 R61. Is that correct? So we will consider those bills heard for purposes of a public hearing today, but will be held in committee as well. Okay? If there's nothing else, what's left of us will adjourn. Thank you.